because it's like, yeah, that was a mask. I feel like a little Vic.
Wallo 267 was sitting across from Gilly the King mid-sentence, talking about Lil Durk's federal trial, and then he stopped. Not paused. Stopped. His jaw tightened, his eyes dropped to the floor, and what came out next was barely above a whisper. King Vaughn told me something. That was it. Nothing after that. Just silence. And Gilly didn't push. Because even Gilly the King, a man who has interviewed everybody from Meek Mill to Jay-Z, understood in that moment that whatever King Vaughn said to Wallo was something that could not be finished on camera. Why would a dead man's words still be dangerous in 2026? Because King Vaughn is gone. Lul Tim walked free. Quando Rondo is sitting in federal prison counting down to his December release date. And Lil Durk, the man who allegedly ordered retaliation for Vaughn's death, is now facing a federal murder-for-hire trial set for August 25th. Every single piece of this story is moving at the same time. And right in the middle of all of it, Wallo 267 almost said something that would have connected that certain people have spent 5 years making sure stay disconnected. This is not regular rap gossip. This is not a beef that gets squashed in a week. Whatever King Vaughn told Wallo before that night in Atlanta, allegedly a conversation that sources close to both men claim happened just weeks before Vaughn was killed, is sitting at the center of everything happening in that Los Angeles courtroom right now. And Wallo knows it. Which is exactly why he went silent. Stay right here. Because by the end of this video you are going to understand why that silence is louder than anything Wallo has ever said out loud. To understand why Wallo 267 going silent carries the weight that it does, you first need to understand exactly who Wallace Peoples is and why, in a world full of people who talk loudly and say nothing, his words have always meant something different. Wallo is not a rapper. He is not a manager. He is not some industry figure who learned the streets from a distance. This is a man who spent 19 years inside a federal penitentiary, 19 years, for armed robbery. 19 years where every single word he spoke had consequence, where silence was survival and speaking too much could cost you everything. When Wallo talks, it is calculated. When Wallo stops talking, it means something specific. And that is precisely why what happened on that set, sitting across from his cousin Gilly the King on the $1 million worth of game platform, sent a chill through everyone who was paying attention. But here is where it gets interesting. Because this breakdown did not come out of nowhere. This was not a man who was caught off guard by a random question. According to people who follow the podcast closely, the conversation had moved into territory about the current state of Lil Durk's federal case, specifically the news that had just broken confirming that Durk's murder-for-hire trial had been officially pushed back to August 25, 2026, after a judge denied 3 of his OTF co-defendants their request for separate trials. That is real. That is documented. That is sitting in federal court records right now. And when that topic came up, something in Wallo's entire energy reportedly shifted in a way that people in that room had allegedly never seen before. You have to understand the weight of what that trial represents. Lil Durk, born Dirk Derek Banks, the face of OTF, the man who built one of the most loyal followings in drill music history, is sitting in federal custody facing a murder-for-hire charge connected to an alleged plot to kill a rival near the Beverly Center Mall in Los Angeles in 2022. The federal government has announced they intend to use his own music as evidence against him. Not rumors. Not allegations from blogs. His actual recorded words, allegedly used to establish intent and pattern of behavior. 3 of his co-defendants, all members of the OTF circle, are now fighting to have their cases separated from his, which, according to legal analysts, typically signals that someone in that group is considering a different legal strategy than standing unified. And this is the part that nobody is talking about openly. When co-defendants start filing motions to sever, it is almost always because at least one of them has been in a room with federal prosecutors having a conversation that the others do not know about yet. Now stay right here, because this is where it connects directly to Wallo. Wallo has publicly spoken about King Vaughn multiple times. He has cried on camera about Vaughn's death. He has broken down talking about the cycle of violence that took Vaughn away from this earth on November 6, 2020, outside a hookah lounge in Atlanta, Georgia. Davon Daquan Bennett was 26 years old. He was arguably the most raw, most authentic storytelling voice to come out of Chicago's O Block in a generation. a young man who grew up watching people die around him, who turned that grief and that survival into music that 3 million people were streaming within weeks of his death. On that night in Atlanta, a confrontation broke out between Vaughn's crew and a group connected to Quando Rondo. Gunfire erupted. Vaughn was shot multiple times. He was rushed to Wellstar Atlanta Medical Center. And within hours, the news broke that he had not survived. Lil Tim, a man connected to Quando Rondo's circle, was arrested the very next day on murder charges. Those charges were eventually dropped in August of 2023, with Lil Tim's attorney Noah Pines confirming to XXL that the state had chosen not to proceed. He walked free. And the wound that never healed in Chicago got torn open all over again. And this is the part that nobody is talking about. Wallo knew King Vaughn personally. Not from a distance. Not from following him on Instagram. According to sources close to both men, Wallo had conversations with Vaughn that went beyond surface level. Conversations rooted in the kind of mutual respect that happens when two people from similar worlds recognize something in each other. Wallo, who had come home from 19 years in prison and built himself into a motivational force, and Vaughn, who was in the middle of building something real while the streets were still pulling at him from every direction. Multiple people who were present in those circles have allegedly described their dynamic as one of genuine mentorship energy. Not performative, not for the cameras, but the kind of real talk that happens when there are no phones recording and no audience watching. But here is where it gets interesting. Because allegedly, in the weeks leading up to that November night in Atlanta, King Vaughn had a conversation with Wallo that was different from anything they had discussed before. According to a source who claims to have been close to Vaughn during that period, Vaughn was not in a careless headspace in those final weeks. He was, reportedly, acutely aware of something. Something specific. Something that, according to this source, he communicated to at least 2 people he trusted before he got on that plane to Atlanta. Wallo 267 was allegedly one of those 2 people. Now here is the twist. Whatever Vaughn said in that conversation, and we are going to get into what sources are claiming that conversation contained, it was allegedly not about Quando Rondo directly. It was not about a specific beef with a name attached. According to people who reportedly have knowledge of what was discussed, Vaughn's concern in those weeks was not coming from outside. It was reportedly coming from something he had noticed, or something he had been told, that made him uneasy about his own immediate circle. Sources close to the situation have been very careful about how much they say publicly, but the consistent thread in what they are allegedly describing points to Vaughn having information about a dynamic inside his own world that he had not fully processed yet, something he was still trying to figure out whether to act on, speak on, or simply sit with quietly. And that is what Wallo allegedly knows. That is what sources claim sits at the center of those 4 words that he could not finish. Stay right here because it gets worse. When the news broke about Durk's trial being pushed to August 25, 2026, one of the details that circulated in the 24 hours following that update was the specific mention that federal prosecutors are not just building a case around a single incident. According to multiple reports from legal journalists covering the case, the government strategy allegedly involves establishing a pattern of behavior, a pattern of alleged association, a pattern of decisions that connect multiple events across multiple years. When you build a case that way, you are not just trying to convict someone of one action. You are trying to tell a jury a story about who someone allegedly is and how they allegedly operate. And to tell that kind of story effectively, prosecutors need witnesses who knew the defendant across different chapters of their life. Witnesses who had real conversations. Witnesses who were trusted. Witnesses who, allegedly, were told things that were never meant to be repeated in a courtroom. And now you understand exactly why Wallo 267 sat across from Gilly to King, started a sentence he has been carrying for years, said King Vaughn told me something, and stopped. Because finishing that sentence was not just about honoring a friend's memory. Finishing that sentence, in the current climate of this federal case, with OTF co-defendants quietly exploring their legal options and August 25th sitting on the calendar like a countdown, was allegedly something that could pull Wallo 267 directly into the middle of a federal investigation he has spent years carefully staying on the outside of. But what exactly did King Vaughn tell him 3 weeks before Atlanta? That question has been sitting in rooms where people who knew Vaughn best have gathered and spoken quietly since at least 2021. And the reason it has never made it to the surface of a public conversation, the reason no blog, no podcast, no interview has ever pressed directly on this specific point, is allegedly because the people who have pieces of the answer understand, either instinctively or from being told directly, that this particular thread leads somewhere that nobody with a functioning sense of self-preservation wants to pull publicly. Until now. Let us start with what we know for certain, because the foundation here matters. Wallo 267 served 19 years in federal prison and came home in 2016. He did not come home soft. He came home sharp, focused, and with a clarity about how the streets work that most people who have never done that kind of time simply cannot access. He built the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast alongside Gilly the King into one of the most listened to hip-hop platforms in the country, a show that has hosted Meek Mill, Jay-Z, Lil Durk, and dozens of artists who came on specifically because Wallo's credibility in the streets gives the conversations a level of authenticity that most podcasts cannot manufacture. He is not a gossip. He is not someone who trades in drama for clicks. Which is precisely why, when Wallo gets emotional about something, the people who know him understand that what they are seeing is real. And this is the part that nobody is talking about. On March 11, 2022, Lil Durk appeared on $1 Million Worth of Game for episode 157. It was one of the most watched podcast appearances Durk had done in years. And in that episode, Wallo looked Durk directly in the eyes, with cameras rolling, with an audience of millions eventually watching, and told him to let go of the street beefs, to leave it alone, to choose the future over the past. Wallo cried during that conversation. Real tears on camera, in front of everyone. And Durk sat there and received it. But here is what most people glossed over in that episode. Wallo did not speak in generalities. He was specific. He was urgent. According to people who were present during the taping, the energy in that room was not the energy of a motivational speech. It was, reportedly, the energy of a man who already knew something was building, who could see the trajectory clearly from where he was standing, and who was trying with everything he had to redirect a situation before it became irreversible. Sources close to Wallo have allegedly described that episode as him saying as much as he could say without saying what he actually knew. That phrase, saying as much as he could say, is the one that keeps coming up, because it implies that there was more. That behind the tears, behind the public plea, behind the love that was visible to everyone watching, there was a layer of information that Wallo was sitting on that gave his urgency a different kind of weight. Now here is the twist, and this one reframes everything. The conversation that King Vaughn allegedly had with Wallo in those final weeks before Atlanta was not, according to sources, a warning about an external threat. Multiple people with alleged proximity to that period in Vaughn's life have described it as something closer to a confession of awareness, Vaughn telling Wallo that he had started to notice things. Inconsistencies. Moments where information that should have stayed inside a small circle appeared to have traveled further than it should have. According to one source who spoke on the condition of complete anonymity, Vaughn allegedly told Wallo something along the lines of, and this is being reported as an alleged account from a second-hand source, not a verified quote, "I don't know who's solid no more. I feel like somebody close to me been moving funny." That alleged sentiment, that specific flavor of distrust directed inward rather than outward, is according to sources what has made this piece of the story so dangerous to repeat publicly, because it does not just implicate an outside enemy. It allegedly raises questions about the people who were physically standing next to Vaughn on the night he died. Stay right here because it gets worse. Now connect that alleged conversation to what is currently happening inside the federal case against Lil Durk. The government, according to legal reporters covering the proceedings, is building a narrative around OTF as an alleged criminal enterprise. Not just a music label, not just a crew, but an organized operation with alleged patterns of violence and retaliation. 3 of Durk's co-defendants filing motions to sever their trials is a significant legal development. When people who are allegedly connected to the same alleged enterprise start fighting to separate themselves legally from each other, it typically signals that the alliance that held them together is beginning to fracture under federal pressure. And when alliances fracture in federal cases, information starts moving in directions that nobody planned for. Here is what is also documented and real. Lil Durk's charges in this specific case are connected to an alleged murder-for-hire plot targeting a rival in Los Angeles in 2022. That is nearly 2 full years after King Vaughn was killed in Atlanta in November 2020. Which means that the federal government, in building their case, is allegedly looking at a window of time and a pattern of alleged behavior that spans at least a 2-year period. That means people who were in Durk's world during that entire window, from before Vaughn's death all the way through 2022, are potentially relevant to the story the government is trying to tell a jury in August. And Wallo 267 was in that world. Not as someone accused of anything. Not as someone with legal exposure. But as someone who had real conversations with real people during that entire period, and who, by every account, was trusted by multiple figures on multiple sides of the dynamics that are now being examined under a federal microscope. But here is where it gets interesting, because the story takes a turn that even people close to the situation were not fully prepared for. When Wallo went silent in that moment, when those 4 words came out and he stopped himself, what happened immediately after is allegedly just as significant as the silence itself. According to people who were reportedly present, Lil King did not press him, did not follow up, did not do what any host would naturally do when a guest drops something that's significant in the middle of a conversation. He changed the subject. Smoothly, naturally, the way you change a subject when you already know what is on the other side of it and you have made a deliberate decision not to go there. Sources who have allegedly spoken to people inside the recording environment have described the moment as one where everybody in the room understood at the same time that that door needed to stay closed. Multiple people. In the same moment. The same understanding. Simultaneously. That is not an accident. That is not coincidence. That is allegedly a room full of people who already knew what King Vaughn told Wallo, and who already understood without needing it explained, exactly why those words could not be finished in front of a camera in 2026, with Lil Durk's August trial date sitting on the calendar and 3 OTF co-defendants quietly exploring every legal option available to them. Wallo going silent was not fear. It was not grief catching up to him unexpectedly. According to sources close to the situation, that moment was allegedly a very deliberate, very conscious decision. A man who has spent 19 years learning exactly when to speak and exactly when silence is the only protection available, choosing, in real time, in front of a live recording, to protect something. The only question that remains, and it is the question that leads directly into the darkest part of this entire story, is whether he was protecting himself, or whether he was protecting someone else. And if it is the second option, if Wallo 267 went silent to protect someone other than himself, then the next question that follows is one that changes the entire geometry of everything surrounding King Vaughn's death, Lil Durk's trial, and the 5 years of silence that allegedly surrounded what Vaughn knew before he ever stepped foot in Atlanta. Here is where the story stops being about a podcast moment and starts being about something with real present tense consequences. Because the silence we are discussing is not historical. It is not a cold case detail from 5 years ago that only matters to people who followed the story in 2020. It is happening right now in 2026, while a federal case is actively building toward an August courtroom, while co-defendants are filing legal motions that signal internal fractures, and while at least one person who was allegedly inside critical conversations during this entire timeline, Wallo 267, is sitting on information that sources claim could shift the understanding of multiple events that the public has never had the full picture on. Let us talk about what is actually at stake in that August 25th courtroom. Lil Durk, born Durk Derek Banks, has been in federal custody since his arrest in October 2024. He is facing murder-for-hire charges under a superseding indictment filed by federal prosecutors in the Central District of California. The specific allegation is that he allegedly ordered the killing of a rival near the Beverly Center Mall in Los Angeles in 2022. Federal prosecutors have announced that they plan to introduce his music as evidence, a legal strategy that has been used in gang and RICO cases across the country and that has, historically, been extremely effective at shifting jury perception. When a jury hears an artist's own words describing violence and then connects those words to alleged real-world behavior, the line between art and evidence becomes dangerously thin for the defendant. But here is the part that nobody is talking about in the mainstream coverage of this case. The federal government in these types of prosecutions rarely builds around a single incident. They build around patterns. They build around relationships. They build around the alleged history of an organization, how it allegedly formed, how it allegedly operated, how decisions were allegedly made and by whom. And when you build a case that way, you need testimony. Not just documents. Not just recordings. Real human beings who sat in real rooms and heard real conversations and are willing, under oath, in front of a jury, to say what they heard. 3 OTF co-defendants filing motions to have their cases severed from Durk's is, according to legal analysts who have followed federal gang prosecutions for decades, one of the clearest signals that the federal government has been having conversations with members of that circle about what cooperation might look like. That does not mean anyone has flipped. Not definitively. But it means the conversation has allegedly been had. And it means the wall of silence that has surrounded OTF's internal dynamics for years is reportedly showing cracks under the pressure of federal leverage. Now connect that directly back to Wallo. Wallo 267 is not a co-defendant. He has not been charged with anything. He is, by all available legal and public record, a free man who built a legitimate career out of his post-incarceration journey and who has become one of the most respected voices in hip-hop mentorship and social advocacy. None of that is in question. But here's what is also true. In federal investigations of this scope and this nature, the government does not limit their witness pool to co-defendants. They talk to everybody who might have relevant information. Everybody who was trusted enough to have real conversations with key figures during the period under investigation. And if the alleged conversations that sources are describing, specifically the conversation between King, Vaughn, and Wallo in the weeks before November 6, 2020, contain information relevant to patterns of behavior that the federal government is currently trying to document and prove, then the question of whether Wallo could theoretically be subpoenaed as a witness is not a hypothetical. It is a real legal possibility that sources close to the situation allege has been discussed privately within circles adjacent to this case. Stay right here because it gets worse. Quando Rondo is currently serving time on federal drug conspiracy charges. His release date has been reported as December 30th, 2026. That means that by the time Lil Durk's August trial concludes, however it concludes, Quando Rondo will reportedly be approaching the final stretch of his federal sentence. The man who was present in Atlanta on the night King Vaughn was killed. The man whose associate Lil Tim was charged with Vaughn's murder and then saw those charges dropped in August 2023. Quando Rondo coming home in December 2026, just months after the conclusion of Durk's federal trial, is a timeline detail that sources close to multiple parties in this story have allegedly described as something everybody is watching very carefully. Because whenever Quando Rondo walks out of that federal facility, the unresolved tension surrounding everything that happened outside that Atlanta hookah lounge in November 2020 does not disappear. It reactivates. And the question of whether that reactivation happens in a media setting, a legal setting, or somewhere else entirely is one that nobody who understands the history of the situation is approaching casually. And here is what they allegedly did not want you to find out. According to sources who claim proximity to the legal team currently navigating the landscape around Durk's case, Wallo's public emotional moments, the crying on Club Shay Shay, the breakdown discussing Durk and Vaughn and black-on-black violence, have allegedly been noticed by people who monitor these situations professionally. Not as gossip, not as content, but as evidence that Wallo is carrying something that is beginning to weigh on him in ways that are becoming externally visible. One source, speaking in terms that were carefully non-specific, allegedly described the situation as a man who knows where the body is buried trying to figure out if staying quiet is still protecting the right person. That is a metaphor. But it is a metaphor that, given the documented history of this story, carries a specific and heavy weight. Because this is the question that nobody who has covered this story has been willing to ask directly. Who is Wallo's silence protecting right now? When Vaughn allegedly told Wallo something in those final weeks, something about noticing that people close to him were moving funny, something about an internal distrust that had begun to crystallize in the weeks before Atlanta, and when Wallo absorbed that information and carried it through Vaughn's death, through Lil Tim's arrest, through Lil Tim's charges being dropped, through Durk's federal indictment, through every public moment where Wallo has spoken about this situation while allegedly stopping just short of the line, the question is not whether Wallo knows something. The question is who that something implicates. Because if the answer to that question points inward, if what Vaughn allegedly told Wallo points not toward Quando Rondo's side of that Atlanta parking lot, but toward the people who were standing on Vaughn's own side, then the conversation that Wallo cannot finish is not just painful. It is allegedly the single most consequential unspoken truth in the entire history of this situation. And there is one more layer to this that sources are only now beginning to speak about in carefully coded terms. Because Wallo did not just warn Lil Durk to let go of the beefs in that 2022 podcast episode. According to people who were allegedly in conversations with Wallo around that same period, he also reportedly told people in his own circle something that did not make it onto the recording. Something to the effect of, and again this is being framed as an alleged secondhand account, there are things about what happened to Vaughn that Durk don't even have the full picture on. If that alleged statement is accurate, it means Wallo's knowledge does not just go back to what Vaughn told him before Atlanta. It allegedly extends into what Wallo came to understand in the aftermath. Information that reportedly reached him through channels that exist entirely outside the public narrative that has been constructed around Vaughn's death since November 2020. That is what was sitting behind those 4 words. That is what stopped mid-sentence on that set. And that is why, with August 25th sitting on the calendar like a loaded weapon, and with Quando Rondo counting down the days to December, and with 3 OTF co-defendants quietly repositioning their legal strategies, Wallo 267 looked at the floor and chose silence over the alternative. The question that remains, the question that this story has not answered and cannot answer yet, because the answer allegedly exists in conversations that have not been had publicly, is whether that silence holds. Whether the weight of what King Vaughn told him, combined with the weight of everything Wallo has allegedly learned since, combined with the very real legal machinery of a federal case that is moving toward its conclusion in August 2026, eventually becomes more than one man can carry alone. Because in federal cases of this magnitude, silence is not always permanent. And the people who know the most are rarely the ones who stay quiet the longest. So here is where we are. Wallo 267 said 4 words and stopped. A federal trial is set for August 25th. 3 co-defendants are quietly maneuvering their legal strategies. Quando Rondo is walking out of federal prison in December. And Lil Tim, the man who was charged with King Vaughn's murder and then walked free, has been moving through the world as if the story is over. But the story is not over. The story has never been over. It has only been waiting for the right pressure at the right moment to break whatever is still being held together by silence and proximity, and the kind of loyalty that gets tested when federal prosecutors start asking questions that cannot be answered with nothing. There are 3 things that nobody knows yet. Nobody knows what King Vaughn specifically told Wallo in those final weeks, and whether that information has already reached people with the legal authority to act on it. Nobody knows what is inside the conversations that are allegedly happening between OTF co-defendants and federal prosecutors as August approaches. And nobody knows what happens to all of the unresolved energy surrounding Vaughn's death the moment Quando Rondo walks out of that federal facility in December 2026 and is no longer insulated by prison walls from the weight of what happened in Atlanta. This story is still moving. Subscribe and hit that notification bell right now, because when this breaks open further, and it will, you need to be here for it. If this video made you think, hit the like button, not for the numbers, but because this story deserves to be seen by people who actually care about the truth behind what happened to King Vaughn. Now drop your answer in the comments. 1 question. Be honest. Do you think Wallo is staying silent to protect Durk, or to protect someone who is still walking the streets right now? Because those are 2 very different answers. And only one of them changes everything. Some silences are protective, and some silences are the loudest confession in the room.